Be the Talk, episode 264, featuring Henry Sue. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Henry Sue. Henry, are you ready to talk?
Yes, I am.
Henry Sue is a business analyst interested in automation and its impact on the future of work. His experience includes operations research at a Sequoia capital-backed startup developing self-driving semi-trucks in Silicon Valley. Henry Sue, welcome to the talk.
Happy to be here.
So your talk is called The Self-Driving Revolution, and this is just a topic that continues to, pun intended, pick up steam and go faster and faster. I am just really thrilled to be talking with anybody that's at the forefront of this. And you mentioned a hierarchy, like there's a level 1, level 2, level 3, all the way up to level 5 of self-driving automobiles. So that was a new classification for me. Please, Henry, take us behind the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the objective of this talk was ultimately to convince the audience that self-driving is the future, and it's going to bring immense benefit to us. And so I think that people should get behind the idea. And as you mentioned, I begin first by defining what autonomous vehicles are, because I think that this is a pretty nebulous concept for a lot. And ultimately, it breaks down into, 6 levels of autonomy from L0 through to level 5. But the ones that I talk about are level 1 through 5, 1 being some basic driver assistance, up to level 5, meaning a fully autonomous vehicle with absolutely no steering wheel, no controls, no anything. So the person doesn't have any control over this vehicle. And I try to focus my talk mostly on level 4 and 5 vehicles, which I think ultimately provide the greatest benefit to society when the person can be completely disengaged from the vehicle. And so after defining the levels of autonomy, I explain self-driving within the context of other major trends that are influencing the automobile industry. These include electrification from companies like Tesla. This includes ride sharing, such as Uber. And this also includes connectivity, which is a new trend in which vehicles can begin to communicate with one another and begin to be more digitized and provide a more personalized experience for drivers. And I explained that self-driving is important because it amplifies these several trends that are reshaping the automotive industry. Then I get into some of the broader benefits of self-driving at a social level, such as their ability to save lives, how they're more environmentally friendly than existing vehicles, and ultimately how it's going to reshape many industries, especially in transport, such as in mining or in freight trucking, but also across the board into areas like consumer robotics, where there's a lot of tie-in between the technology in self-driving and those other industries. Finally, I mentioned a couple of the drawbacks of self-driving, such as some of the ethical dilemmas that we need to solve, issues of cybersecurity, and also the issue of displaced jobs. But the conclusion is that despite these drawbacks, I think the benefits of self-driving are absolutely immense. And for that reason, society should definitely get behind a self-driving future.
Well, there you have it, folks. We're going to have a link to Henry's talk in the show notes, and I'll let you know where you can go to get that a little bit later in the broadcast. But man, how cool. And just like anything else, there are so many systems. We have so much complexity right now. And really, it's almost like we're in a really bad pinch right now. So the best way forward is just to really solve these issues, maybe get some of the extra cooks in the kitchen or drivers behind the wheel out of the way and figure out how to solve some of these problems on a broader level. I was watching some video. I don't know if it was really your talk or something else I saw, but it was this concept of latency. And I just remembered my father always so annoyed, and now me annoyed taking after my dad in a traffic jam, thinking, why can't everybody just go the same speed all the time? And that is basically the concept of latency, that we all have to have that microsecond or centisecond or half second delay so that we don't slam into somebody and create an even bigger accident. But this thing was just showing that particular concept. I know there must be hundreds and hundreds of those types of issues to solve. Henry, let's go a little farther back. When did this start for you? How is this something that you kind of stumbled on, or did you have a little bit of a track to get where you are?
Yeah, if we go to the very nexus of this, I'd have to rewind to back in 2008 when I was a grade 8 student, and I joined my junior high robotics club, and we competed in the First Tech Challenge robotics competition. And part of this competition involved building a robot that would transport hockey pucks into a central goal. And of the 2.5 minutes of gameplay, the first 30 seconds were autonomous. So the robot had to move on its own and move around the field on its own. And so I guess that was my first exposure to presumably an autonomous vehicle. One of my best friends was also a member of that team. And just a couple years ago, he dropped out of school in Waterloo to begin a self-driving golf cart company at the time. He went down to Silicon Valley and worked, attended Y Combinator, and eventually this became a self-driving truck company that he currently runs. And that's the company that I worked at over the summer. And so it was ultimately through him that this interest in me sparked. And he is looking at one specific application of self-driving vehicles, that of trucking, which has immense economic potential. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think I found the entire industry to be very interesting in terms of the broad range of applications that self-driving vehicles could have, from freight trucks to mining haul trucks, down to passenger vehicles, down to ride-sharing applications. And I think the scope really expands far beyond that, which is why I dubbed this the self-driving revolution, because I think it's completely going to revolutionize so many aspects of society. So that's where this interest sparked, and ultimately how it's carried through to today.
Cool. Well, I know I've got a friend of mine locally who works for AAA, and about 1.5 years ago, he comes back from some conference, and he is like the evangelist for the self-driving revolution. And I'm like, what in the heck are you talking about? And then it all started leaking out, in various ways. I would see the signs, not the least of which was, I think, when was it? It was about 1 year ago, maybe, that Elon Musk came out with his plan for the new Tesla, and including the self-driving semi-trucks. And I watched that presentation. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So my question to you at this point, speaking of Elon Musk, I mean, there's a little bit of drama going on. I want to honor the guy and his vision, and just honor his humanity, because he's been doing so much for so long, working day and night for a better future for all of us. So I don't even want to talk about that. But what I do want to ask you is, maybe a little bit of drama. Are there other figures out there besides, Elon Musk, or is he kind of the figurehead and it all rises and falls with him? Or, is there a future in this? Are there other standard bearers that maybe we haven't seen yet that are picking up and running behind the scenes to push these things forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Elon Musk is obviously the poster child in some ways, but I'd say that there are several major companies all working to solve the self-driving problem, both from a tech perspective as well as from an automotive perspective. So within the tech space, we have Tesla, we have Waymo, which is a subsidiary of Google. We have Apple that's working on their own version of this car. So we have several players who've taken a jump start into this space. And then from an automobile perspective, there are several automotive companies working on vehicles such as Ford, Audi. Pretty much all the major manufacturers are moving in this direction. And so we see a convergence here of tech and automobiles, and not necessarily individual people driving the efforts, but huge companies with massive talent pools pushing this agenda forward.
So it really is a convergence then. So the decisions have been made behind the doors. It's not like the electric car documentary where someone took the proprietary stuff 20 years ago and burned it, or took it. I mean, I remember watching some documentary, and it was so horrible and so corrupt what they did with this technology, and we could all be driving electric cars right now. I don't know if you know that specific one or not, Henry, but it's good to know that they realize if we don't adapt, we're going to be like Blockbuster Video or what, any of the other brands that I could name, Kodak camera or whatever. It sounds like the industry is already past that point, and that's a good thing. What's your final wrap up on, at least on the industry and your part in it?
Yeah, so I think the industry definitely is at the tipping point, and we can see that because huge players have been gaining momentum, but then there's a lot of activity within the startup space too, with dozens of companies building self-driving cars, a couple of building self-driving trucks. So ultimately, we see momentum shifting in this direction. And I think where it's most obvious is that it's ultimately feeding upwards towards policy, where entire governments, state governments are becoming more receptive to the idea of self-driving and beginning to propose legislation that allows an environment conducive to testing of self-driving vehicles. And so I think for all those reasons, the industry has passed its tipping point, and now it's just a matter of time for us to roll these vehicles out onto the road.
All right, Talk Universe, we've been talking to Henry Su. His talk is called The Self-Driving Revolution. It's all about apparently not 5, but 6 levels of automation. And you're going to want to check that out. But we're going to pivot to you first in just a moment for the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with Henry Su. It is time for the Blitz Round, in which I'm going to ask Henry a series of either or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent talk. Are you ready, Henry?
Yeah, absolutely.
First off, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
So I applied for this talk. It was hosted by the University of Alberta, and I was actually a student at the time. And so I definitely heard about it through my classmates who are part of the organizing team. But I did throw in my own application, and that was run independently by myself.
Well, just like the rest of us, Talk Universe. Isn't that great? All right. Second question. Henry, are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
Interesting. And so I think usually I'd be more of a blender, perhaps even a bit of an improviser when I'm giving talks. But with the structure of the TED Talk, I had to fit the talk under a certain time limit. And so I wanted to ensure that every sentence I said made a profound impact. And for that reason, I essentially memorized the script for this TED Talk.
So how did that play for you? Were you comfortable? Were you able to speak from the heart? Were you feeling like you were kind of reciting it a little bit? It's a very technical talk, but it's also a great talk. How was that experience for you?
Well, I thought it was pretty good. I think once I get very familiar with the script down to memorizing it, I can then pull back and give myself a bit more leeway and make it sound more natural. And so I felt even though I memorized it, it didn't come across as robotic, which is ultimately what I was aiming for.
Yeah, well, and that's whenever I have an actor or anyone in television production or anything like that, they always memorize that. When I ask them that question, they're always saying, I'm a memorizer, but they internalize it and they speak from the heart. Congratulations, Henry, the scientist was able to do the same thing just like an acting pro. So awesome. Good on you. So you walk out on stage. Did you have nerves? Were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
Certainly, it was my first talk of a scale of that nature. But I do have a fair amount of experience speaking prior to this event, also through debate competitions and whatnot. And so I felt pretty at ease on stage. And I think there might have been some initial nerves, but as soon as I started getting talking, those nerves instantly turned into excitement.
What's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you prepare?
So I think a good tip is getting your talk out and speaking in front of friends, speaking in front of family, getting used to being judged on stage. and getting them to judge you for not only what you're saying, but how you're saying it, what your body language is like, and getting all this feedback so that you're very comfortable doing the same thing in front of not 3, but 300 people.
Yeah. Well, what was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
So right before my talk was actually an entertainment intermission, and they had a student who was in my class in chemical engineering, and he went up and performed slam poetry in front of the audience. And this is I never knew that he had this ability, but it was absolutely amazing. And it was pretty tough for my talk to follow that up, actually.
Tough act to follow. That's a real consideration. They didn't have like an MC or anyone to kind of rebalance the energy of the room, or they just introduced you.
There was an MC in between, but I think there's a lot of excitement after that.
Okay. Well, hey, it doesn't hurt.
Not at all.
Doesn't hurt. It could have been a low energy or a somber energy or crazy energy. I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of energy. Hey, everybody, we've been enjoying the Blitz Round with Henry Su. His talk is called The Self-Driving Revolution. If you want to watch that talk, I would recommend that you watch it. Go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. We will have the link to that talk, as well as we will have a link to help you get in touch with Henry on his LinkedIn profile. We'll have another link right in there. And in a moment, we're going to be right back to Henry Su for the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with the final word of advice to Talk Universe from Henry Su.
Great. So this is more a piece of life advice, I think, but a very profound idea that I heard through other podcasts and through people that I'm close with is you are the average of the 5 people who are closest to you. And so what this means is that you should really be deliberate on who you're spending your time with, be it your family, your closest friends, your role models. And I find that this has ultimately pushed me through life a lot, where a lot of the things that I've gotten into, including public speaking, including robotics, I got into these things because I had a friend who was extremely passionate about it. And he was a close friend, and therefore he brought me into it as well. And eventually I discovered my own passion in these things. And so I think it's super important to reach out to the people who inspire you and who are your role models, and to get close to these people, because their energy is contagious. It will rub off onto you. And I think ultimately that's how we as an entire community are able to improve ourselves.
Well, Henry Su, thank you so much for taking some time and carving out your schedule to be on the talk today and share your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.